Okay, we've got a lot of work to do here. So we are in Nefesh Hachaim, Shaar Daled Perek Yutes, and hopefully, with Siyata Deshmaya, I'd like to be able to explain a very basic concept here today. The Nefesh Hachaim says, if you have it in front of you, V'shem Hashem Nikra Alav. Remember, we're talking about the benefit package of somebody who learns Torah Lishma La'amita. And one of them is, going further on, is V'shem Hashem Nikra Alav. Hashem's shame is Nikra Alav. With your permission, I'm just going to mute everybody. Okay. Hashem's name is called on him. Hashem Nikra Alav. The question is, what does that even mean? Hashem Nikra Alav. Ki ha'Torah kula shmoisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the Torah is every word of the Torah is names of Hashem. Ki maimarim zichronim livracha. And here's this proof from the Gemara. Minayim lebirchas haTorah lefanah min haTorah. The Gemara says in Brachas Chaf Aleph, how do we know that we're supposed to make a bracha before we learn Torah? Shenemar ki shem Hashem ekra havu goydol le'elokeinu. That when you say the name of Hashem, you should say goydol le'elokeinu, which is the bracha birchas haTorah. But it doesn't talk about Torah. All it talks about ki shem Hashem ekra, that when I say Hashem's name. So from here we learn that learning Torah is saying Hashem's name. Yes? V'chein lamdu is another Gemara. Sha'osek b'Torah shchina shruya imai. Tichsiv. How do we know that the Shechina is with you when you study Torah? Because it says, B'chol ha-makom asher askir eshmi avai elecha v'erachticha. Again, what's the Gemara's raya from the pasuk? All we see here is that where you say Hashem's name, Hashem gives you a bracha. A bracha means the Shechina. Chol hamakom asher askir shmi avei elecha v'erachticha. Kamash malan, that when you're learning Torah, you are saying the Shem Hashem. And therefore you get the bracha, which is the Shechina. So you have two solid rayas from the Gemara that the Torah is called the Shem Hashem. But what does it mean? Shem Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Hashem is Elokim, etc. Adonai. So Uvazoyar Bamidbar Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph. So here we have a little bit of background information from the Zohar. Kamo Chaviva Oiraisa Kame Kutshabrichu. Take a look how beloved Chaviv the Torah is before Hashem. Torah. Because every place where words of Torah can be heard, Kuchabrichu v'chol chayolan delay Hashem and all the malachim kulut saisin limilule. Everybody's listening. If we're learning Torah right now, presumably lishma, everybody's listening. The Kuchabrichu asil dayoreme, and Hashem comes and lives with us. Hadahu dechsiv, again, b'chol hamakam asher askir shmi. So what does it have to do with limud HaTorah? So there's only one answer, and that is that limud HaTorah is saying the Shem Hashem. Another raya from the Zohar. And then if we go a little further, Ubeparashas Mishpatim Kuf Chaf Daled, in the Zohar and Mishpatim, it says, Koman deyinter orche deraisa, mishtadel bei, anyone who keeps the Torah and learns it, ishtadel bei means he learns it. Koman deishtadel b'shma kadisha, mefurish, as if you're learning the Shem Hashem. Kadisha, disani non, oiraisa kula shma de kutshabrichu. We have a clear raya because we know that the Torah is the Shem of Hashem. So we don't have to say theories anymore. The Zohar spells it out mefurish for us that learning Torah is learning the Shem Hashem. Begin deraisa kula shma chad kudsha brichahi kadishahi. The whole Torah is one big Shem Hashem. So you thought the Shem Hashem was Yud Kei Vav Kei, which it is. But the Torah is also a Shem Hashem. Shma Ilah, it's a high Shem. Shma decholol kol shmayin, it's a Shem which includes every other Shem. Uman degara eschad mina, Uman degara eschad mina, and if you leave any Torah out, Kilo avid pegimusa b'shma kadisha. That if you take even one letter out of the Torah, so still the Torah reads well, but it's already a pagam, not just in the Torah, it's a pagam in the Shem. So this gives us a deeper insight as to what's so bad about having missing a kutzei shel yud in the Torah. The answer is you're not messing with the Torah, you're messing with the Shem Hashem. Okay, everybody with me?
I mean, with you up until the point where understanding what it means that Hashem is a shame and what is the shame, like it's sort of those.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to try to explain now. I just want to point out something that yesterday mentioned in Shul was Ches Tevis. So that was the day that was originally a fast day in Megillas Tainus, Ches Tes Yud. They're all three fast days. Shulchan Aruch brings in Kuf Pei, Aruchaim Kuf Pei, Sif Beis. They're all fast days. And the fast day of yesterday, Ches Tevis, was the Greeks forced us to translate the Torah into Greek. And that's a fast day. So I asked the question, what's the fast about? I mean, the whole Art Scroll is doing that. It's a big simcha, that the Torah is translated into foreign languages. It's a Kiddush Hashem, l'chayra. And you see, even when the Bnei Yisrael came before they came into Eretz Yisrael, they wrote the Torah down, b'shivim lashonos, 70 languages. But without understanding, we could understand that the problem here is that once you translate once you translate the Torah into Lashon Yavonis, it's for sure missing oisius, right? It's like, yes, it's a translation, but it's not. It doesn't have the oisius and the drushos and the yud. So what's happening there? Maybe the reason why it's a fast day is, yes, it brought out the Judeo-Christian understanding of monotheism on the one hand, but on the other hand, the tainus was the fast of it was the mourning was that you no longer have the Shem Hashem Shalom.
If you learn the translation, is there a Yotzi Limit Torah and is there Kedusha in the translation? You need to be treated with Kedusha?
It's a big difference, that's for sure. So it's interesting that there's two parts learning Torah. One is the words, and one is the actual Torah, the Kedushas HaTorah. So if you're reading it in English, that's why when it's better, let's say, to read it in Hebrew and refer to the translation as opposed to just reading it in English. The OCS, that's true, by the way, of Torah Shebiksav. It's not true of Torah Shebal Peh, because Torah Shebal Peh is Kulai Svara. It's all about our understanding of it, so that has no OCS involved. There's no Shemus Hashem. But the Kedushas HaTorah is the Shem Hashem, and the Kedushas HaTorah got lost with the translation, lost in the translation, as the expression goes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech shakol niyeh.
So halacha, you don't have to treat a Septuagint with any Kedusha?
No. There's an Indian of treating it with kavod, not Kedusha. So I want to try to explain this a little bit. Let me see if I know how to share my screen. 1 second. Dan put his finger on the question that what does it mean God has a name? What does it mean the Torah is the name of Hashem? What is a name? Now, just before we begin, I've discussed this a number of times, so let's try to get a little bit more thorough today. As much as I can understand, maybe you can understand better, but I'm just putting it out there. A person, you and I, all of us have a name for the most part. I once met an old man, and I asked him, "What's your name?" He told me, "I don't have a name," which was kind of like mind-boggling to me. Don't have a name. Not everybody has to have a name. But when we have a name, that's a sort of we all have a name. That's sort of our outward presentation. In other words, you say, "Hi, I'm Joe." So Joe is this is some kind of a kesher between my identity and who I really am. Obviously, it's not the whole thing. Maybe not even a small part of it, but it's my name. It's the beginning. If I'm not telling you my name, it means I don't even want to know you. Well, why are you asking me my name? Hashem said. Why are you asking me my name? Because I want to know. So the name is like the most external articulation of the mahus of that thing. Like there is what we are, our nefesh, our ruach, our neshama, our body, our gashmias. We can be a number, but it's got to be a name. At the end of the day, it has a name or a number or something. See, the Nazis, they reduced us to numbers. That was their plan. Like you don't even exist in terms of a name, a number. Something to keep track of. So, one second, please. Can everyone see this? This is a Sefer Oav Yesh, which is actually written by a Belzer Chassid. And he explains a number of Kabbalistic issues in Yonim. And here in this particular passage, if you look all the way to the right, he speaks about oisios, letters. And I just want to go through it with you and try to understand what are letters, referring to the letters of the Aleph Beis, the alphabet. Aleph Beis, alphabet. And we know that there are Chaf Beis, oisios, there are 22 letters in the Jewish alphabet. Alphabet, obviously, the same words as Aleph Beis. In Yonon, let's read it carefully with me. In Yonon Baharei Kodesh Bahasfiros. If you want to understand letters, oisios, otiot, you first need to understand that they come from the spheros. Yuvan derech mashal. So before we go further, let's understand a mashal. Lenefesh ha'adam, to a person's your personality, your nefesh. Ko'ofen ha'oifas aseres koichoseh chabad chagat nehim. Okay, don't get nervous. There are 10 spheres, yes? Look at the Rosh Hashanah, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. That is the, if we were able to see, which we can't, the depth, the neshama of the whole Bria, what we would see was the 10 spheres. Bein ela adam leila atzmai, v'hainu kishoylu machshavtei rayonei chachmir hurei libay, v'chein bein v'ayvasam lezulasai, hurak al yedei yislapshusam ba'oisios. So here, this is the mashal, not the nimshal. Let's not get mixed up. And the mashal is that, let's say you have a thought. You do have a thought. Just a tiny thought. You don't even know you're thinking it. And then the thought gets more developed and more developed and more developed until it comes to a very concrete thought. Maybe you can write it. And then it comes to dibur. That thought, in order to have any kind of articulation at all, even in our thinking, has to be in osios. We can only think in words. I mean, even if you have a visual mind, you have that strength. But a thought is, let me think before I say. So there is a process from the germination of a thought all the way through dibur. and it's all about osios. So we see that there's a whole hishtalshut, a chain that starts from machshava, dibur, and then finally lemaisa. So dibur is an expression, an articulation of our machshava. And that's true, he says, whether we're just thinking ourselves and talking to ourselves. Most people don't talk to themselves. Whether I want to express it to somebody else. You have to put some gashmias to it, and that gashmias to my thought is called oisius. You can write it, you can express it. Kigama machshava, because even thought, it's a bit of a chiddush, maybe. Mitzuraf me oisios, k'maya dibur. We think in letters. We think with the alphabet. However, oisioseha ruchnios v'dakos yoser me oisios adibur. The letters that we're thinking about in our brain when we're thinking about something is much more dak. It's much more fine than when we have to actually articulate it, ba. What happens is the letters come together, and they weave with each other, till those letters finally become words. The words become sentences. The sentences become paragraphs. Paragraphs become a story, or the E equals MC squared. It's all about oisius. So that's the mashal. Everybody with me so far? Let me raise your hand for a second if you will. Kain al derech zeh, the same thing is true. B'spherois ha'el yoinais in the spherois. That was a mashal to the way a person thinks. Now let's get to the real stuff. Al derech zeh b'spherois ha'el yoinais. When it comes to the high spherois, high spherois are the moichin, chachma bina v'das. That's where everything starts. The keser. In order for those spheroids to manifest themselves in the world of Gashmias, a table, a chair, a person, a plant, those spheroids have to be mislabesh beside oisios. So everything that we see, touch, and feel, and everything that we are, starts out kivyachol as oisios. The oisios are not Hashem. The oisius is the very first articulation of the Ratzon Hashem into this Bria. Behain, and watch this carefully, Chof Beis, there are 22 letters of the alphabet, Chof Beis Mine Sidarim, Shebehen Oivrois Hasphirois Listader Seder Giluyehem Lepoil. There are 22 orders of events that the spheroids go and they become orderly as they are revealed bepoil in the world of Gashmias. Ki spheroids hein soid habriya v'anagosel b'koyach. B'koyach means it hasn't yet been manifested. B'koyach means that it's b'koyach bepoil. B'koyach means it's still in its potential form. Soif davar machshava tchila, right? Soif ma'isa machshava tchila. Achein haderach asher tetzoena boy lefoil. How does Hashem's ratzon articulate itself and express itself in the poil, in the world of action? Don't think that the oisios are the actual spheres. Elakamer shein sdarim mesuyamim hamsukanim lahastir giluyei haspheres. Rav tmunasam b'ksav, and the fact that you can write them down, Meiris al Giluyehem, means that, okay, revealed. Like, in other words, you have a certain, by writing something down, let's say, you've taken a whole process of Hashem starting from the Ratzon Hashem, and it gets put into oisiyos, meaning it's put into the world of Gashmias. Can you put that in writing? Maris al giluyehem, oifanehem, lefichach nikrois oisiyos. That's what the word oisiyos means. Lashon asa boiker. Asa boiker v'gam loylo. Yeshayahu said, all he's trying to bring out from here, I believe, is asa. You thought it was an Aramaic word. No, it's a word that Yeshayahu used. Asa boiker. It's developed into boker. Think of, like, if you're old enough to think about developing a film. You know, if you've ever been in a dark room in the olden days. So you take the film, it's like nothing, and then it develops and articulates into a negative, and then from there into a positive. These are the steps of development. We don't develop film anymore. You take a picture, but it's digital. There's no development involved. It's immediate, I guess. So, but development is something where something is going from a thought, a machshava, something you see, something making an impression, something coming out into some form of gashmias in a negative form, and then coming into a positive form and as a picture. But you know, so it's not that the picture is the thing, it's just it's a representation of it. Nimsa lamad. So from here we can learn. Shasfiros tiglena muchrachais lishtabed l'sidrei ha'oisiyos. That the spheroids all are revealed through the letters. Beside b'dvar, now here's the pasuk that Nefesh Hachaim brings. Beside b'dvar Hashem shamayim nasu. That b'dvar Hashem, with the words of Hashem, shamayim nasu, the heavens were created. What does it mean with the words? Hashem created the world with words, right? Vayomer Hashem yehi or. Asar mamaris nivra ha'olam. So what it means is that what's going on before that in the machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have no idea. What the Ratzon Hashem is, we also have no clear idea. But what we can start with is the oisiyos that Hashem put together, b'dvar Hashem, that's called dibur, nas shamayim nasu. Let me ask you a question. Somebody pushed their space bar and answer me. So what were the words that Hashem said? What were the oisiyos that Hashem used? Yes, the Torah. So istakel baraisu bar alma. So the very first thing that Hashem did, kivyachol, is let me write this down. And that's the Torah. So if you're learning Torah, you're actually accessing the original ksav oisiyos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's not Hashem, but it's the oisiyos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where his ratzon was first articulated in the Torah. Very simple. It's simple and it's not simple. Let's go a little further. Gam nikra v'chein nikrais ha'oisiyos b'shem avonim. In the Sefer HaYetzirah, you see that oisiyos are also referred to as stones, like building blocks. Ki hein b'bchinas doimim, a stone is the lowest level of gashmias. It has no breath, it has no life, it doesn't grow. Hamadrega achinamucha b'dalad yisodos of doimim tzomei achai medaber. Lumas, as opposed to hamoichin v'hamidos, u'mishamshes l'binyan bayis me'ever lahem. So, you know, like you have your dream house. So the dream house is something you dream about, but then you need to kind of like articulate it, and then maybe go to an architect that's going to articulate it even better. And then you need to get engineering plans, and then you get to the guy bringing the stones, which takes a long time. So the guy bringing the stones is the domain articulation of the dream house. My dream is becoming reality, yeah? Yes.
It's a compelling muscle because you can only experience the person can only experience the binyan, but can't even come close to the root of the spark of imagination that led to the blueprint, that led to the engineering, that led to the guy that brought the stones. So the person can only experience that. It's like being in the old days when there was like a telegraph. All you had was this string of letters, but there was a whole universe 1,000 miles away on the other side of the telegraph that you couldn't possibly relate to.
So I imagine that if you study these things, like if you're an archaeologist or somebody who studies architecture, ancient architecture, so what you're doing when you're looking at a particular building which is 1,000 years old, and you're saying, what were they thinking? and maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe you got it, maybe you didn't get it. So that's the mashal. So we have really two mashalim, which are the same thing, an even and an ois. And the Sefer HaYetzirah interchanges the two things. So the oisios are building blocks of the Bria. Would you want to say, Yitzhak?
I wanted to ask if at the most primitive level, at the beginning of the germination of the idea, we're calling it letters. Could we think of it in terms of abstract symbols, or does it have to be osios mamish?
Abstract symbols are oisios, but until it can make a sound, it's not an ois. So like it starts off with where Lufiar Havana, it starts off with ba baby talk, until you get into Shakespeare, and it's the same dibur, but everything is coming together as a story here. So the first oisios, I think that when it's already not as abstract as you're talking about, the first oisios come about in the Torah. By the way, I just like the Gemara. Just want to make a couple of major, simple points. Number one is, like, the Gemara asks questions like, Lama HaTorah Maschil Bebeis. Should have started with an aleph. Why start with Bereshis? So, I think to myself, what kind of question is that? Because the word Bereshis starts with a base. What should it start with an aleph? What are you going to say? So this question is asked, and they say, okay, could have said Elokim bara Bereshis. Instead of Bereshis bara Elokim, could have said Elokim bara Bereshis. But what the real question is, the omek of the question is that Beis and Aleph and Gimel and Zayin and Ches, they all have a different energy of manifesting and articulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. So why Beis? Why Beis? What the answer to that is further afield. But I'm just saying that the question is Beis, and you have in the Torah, pardes, like everything has pshat, remez, drush, sod. So I'm answering you, Yitzhak, that all goes into the ois once you understand the depth of the ois. Yeah, it becomes abstract. So let's just finish this little piece here. About im kolzet, there's high letters and low letters. So the high letters, mushrashais ba'atzmius hasfiros, umuchadais imahem betachlis hayichud. The highest letters is where we attached. That's what gets attached. Like imagine a rope. There's letters down here. There's letters on top. Those letters are what's attached to the spheros. Our letters are like Hashem's letters, because our letters come from Hashem's letters. But they become detached. I believe this is what it means, that it was possible for the Yevanim to have the Torah translated. That's a detachment from its original source. I believe that's the Nakuda. Now this is fascinating. I'm just wanting to look at this letter. I'm in the end of the second paragraph here. And I want you to see this. Yan, however, shehein mugbalais, since letters are physical, they're limited with physical boundary. An aleph is an aleph, a base is a base. And by the way, daika, then in the Torah, one of the things that you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to have one letter touching another letter, right? Each one has to be mukaf gevil. So yan shehein mukaf gevil means surrounded with parchment. The letter has to be an independent thing, even though it has to come together as a word, which is interesting. So yan shehein mukbalais, since they have their limitation, ein b'efshariyu sehen l'shnei hafachim b'noisei echad. There cannot be a contradiction. There can't be two opposing ideas in one letter, because it's gashmias. Lios b'matzav shel giloi v'havshatos. U'leidach b'matzav shel isachtus b'rishorashin. What does this mean? It means that if you go all the way up to the Moichin, there's no contradictions. Hillel and Shammai is all saying the same thing. And darkness and light is all the same thing. And Tov and Ra is all the same thing. But once it gets articulated into letters, it's either this way or that way, yeah? Can't be both. So you can't have, whereas you can have a stira in the olam of echad, and it's not a stira at all. You can't have a stira in the world of the oisius that we see, hence you have machlekes. In the final manifestation, is it white, is it black? You understand this? This is an amazing yesod. I want to explain this a little bit from the parashas that we're just reading.
Sorry, can I ask a question? So what he's saying here is that even though, so the osios are the final, stop on the chain, from Hashem's machshava, so to speak, all the way down to the place of gashmias where we can relate to it. Those are osios. The osios are the way we can relate somehow. After all of this, he's shtalshalus down from the machshava of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. That the osios are the way we can possibly relate. And even though you cannot contain in an os shnei hafachim, although if you took it all the way back, all of those hafachim are built into. Obviously, I can't wrap my mind around a place where Tov and Ra are the same thing, but that's because I live here.
Right. So we're limited because we also are made of osios. We ourselves are an articulation of Hashem's ratzon. We have human limitations. I'll give you a good example of this from the parsha that, just follow me in a deep way for a minute. Paro has a dream. He sees, again, how many cows? Somebody?
14.
14 cows, Gil. So what was so hard to interpret? Because he had 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. Everybody understands that fat cows means sova and skinny cows means famine. Every kid in Ghana will tell you that. You don't have to have Yosef Hatzadik to tell you that. What they can't understand is, how can you have in the same dream 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows? Meaning either you have sova or you have razai. Either you have ochel or you have ra'av. So the kasha, the difficulty in the dream was that the dream was a stira minei obey. Vein paiser isam lapare. Now the thing is like this: that a dream is a little bit of access to a world of echad. Meaning, to dream, the impossible dream, that you can only dream of peace, for instance. Or you can only, as the Gemara says, you can only dream of elephants going through the eyes of needles. But you can dream anything. You can be in fire and be cold. You can be in water and be dry. A dream is full of stirus. Why? Because it's not mugbal by the oisios of articulation in the world of Gashmias. Until Yosef was able to explain in his Ruach HaKodesh that Elikim Poiser as Chalaim Parait, that in the world of Hashem, there's no stira. It's all one thing. And you could have Soiva and Razain at the same time. And Paro said, wow, that's godly. So interpreting a dream, if you are so inclined, is to take a world of impossible because there's no boundaries in a dream. It's the ratius of machshava. It's actually quite an amazing thing that we do dream anyways, but what we're doing is what we're removing because we're sleeping, because we're 1/60th dead, et cetera, you get an idea of what it's going to be like in the Olam HaEmes, where all the boundaries of Olam Haza, all the scientific borders that we know, simply don't exist anymore. Why? Because
maybe that's why such great art and great music are so compelling, because they release us from that boundary of what's mugbal.
I thought you were going to say what they said when I was a kid, and that's why people take LSD.
It happens to be I was thinking about the Grateful Dead at that moment. But.
No, but the idea is that you can blur the boundaries. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. We live in this world. Why should we do that? But you can blur the boundaries. And by blurring the boundaries, you've come to a place of echad, right? You can dream anything. You can dream anything. But then you wake up. Let's finish this. I believe, by the way, this is a deep thing about the parsha that we have to fully understand. The difference between a dream and its interpretation is the difference between echad and oisios. So the last thing he says here, we're running out of time, so I just want to finish this as well. That oisios come together. The first articulation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's oisios was the Torah itself. Lefichach nikres kli amnusai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Emanusai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's his tools. He created the world with oisios. V'zeh ma she'amru kol haTorah kula shem moisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, brings us right back to the Nefesh Hachaim. Where does it say that, by the way? Kol haTorah kula shem moisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, Muva b'Ramban, b'Psicha la'Torah, but really it comes from the Zohar, Parshas Emor, which is the quote of Nefesh Hachaim. The Zohar was Pashatem. Begin d'oraisa kula shama dekutsha brichu. Omnam atzmus hashemus v'toichanam v'chein makar reishusan shel oisios hem lamala mala me'al hasfiros. The makar goes even higher than the spheros themselves. Okay, so what did we learn? Let's see if I got. What we learned is that, and I want to learn more about it, that the whole world is about oisios. I want to tell you something. There's a Sefer HaYetzirah. So Sefer HaYetzirah, it's a Kabbalah Sefer, probably the first Kabbalah Sefer. The Sefer HaYetzirah is all about oisios. There's nothing else in there except for oisios. It's all explaining, that's how important this is. It's all explaining how the oisios came together as creation itself. And if you look, in Perek Beis of Bereshis, so there the pasuk speaks about how Hashem brought all the animals and creations to him, and he gave each one a name. Yes. So the Rabbeinu B'chaya, which I've become very familiar with because I have a new Mikrois Gedolos which has the Rabbeinu B'chaya. So Rabbeinu B'chaya explains, mamash, how every animal became when Adam Arishan named every animal, it was with the oisios of its essence, meaning, as he says, for instance, he goes through all kinds of animals, but an aryeh, which is a lion, aryeh ends off with the Shem Hashem, which is a Yud Hey, which is the Shem Hashem. And it's because it's the king of the jungle. And he explains what the Aleph is Elokim, and what the race is doing there. And the same things with the tzipor, and the same thing was with it's not just grammar, it's not just etymology. It's Adam Arishain had this gilui of being able to give everything a name in the world of Gashmias, so we know what it is. Otherwise, we don't know what it is. What's its essence? So science will take us only so far as to understanding what it is. But then the other level is, what is it really? We're going to learn on next week that a person has all chaf beis oisius in him. That's Reb Tzadok teaches us. But everything is all about oisius. That's what the Sefer Yetzirah is about. He says a gewaldige chiddush in the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is miyuchas, I'm sure you've heard, to Avram Avinu. So what does that mean? That Avram Avinu wrote the Sefer Yetzirah? Maybe yes, maybe not. I don't know. But one of the, maybe you don't know this, one of the great giluyim that came to Avram Avinu was the chachma of Adam Arishain, that he knew how everything, the oisius in every single thing. He understood the oisius. He probably understood much more than the oisius.
It's 10 o'clock.
But he understood the essence of the world, and by that understanding, by understanding the oisius, and by that he was able to come to understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when we're learning Torah, here's the final line. When we're learning Torah, so what it means is that we're not just going up very high, we're going up to the original oisius of the Bria, and those oisius were, and here's the final sentence, Yistakel Boiraiso Boralmo. Hashem looked at those oisius, and that became the essence of the Bria itself. Yom Tov.
What did Marisha name the animals? Did he give them their essence, or did he capture their existing essence in the name that he gave them for the world to see what they really are?
He captured it. It's clear in the Sefer Yetzirah.
Is it oisios?
There's some things he didn't know the name for. That's two, right?
Do we have oisios and we got tevos? So tevos is also a box, which is more, it's a word and it's already got sort of boundaries. It's already a form. Is that what it is?
In other words, a teva is a number of oisios that come together so it's actually an expanded boundary.
It's form. It's got a form.
Yeah. I was always fascinated by the fact that how do you say a sentence?
Mishpat.
Okay, so what does it got to do with mishpat? Melech ohev tzedakah or mishpat, he loves sentences. Use your words. What's the connection between a sentence and a din? And it's very interesting that in English, what's it called when the court sends you to a sentence?
Sentenced to death.
He was sentenced to death or to life. So it's interesting that a sentence is a mishpat. Okay, you think about that. I'm not going to give you any drushes. Something to think about.
When we continue, are we going to discuss how this relates to Hashem's totality?
How Hashem's, what, the Shem Hashem?
Yeah, we didn't really touch on that. We talked what Osios are, but what has to do with Hashem being, the whole Torah is Hashem Hashem.
Oh, that's the Nefesh Hachaim. Of course, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But we got to go, we need to know what he knew in order to get to it, that everything is Shem Hashem. By the way, I just want to give you a marmakom, the Shari Ora. Familiar with that sefer?
Yeah.
So the Shari Ora, which is, maybe when we finish Nefesh Hachaim, we'll learn it. So, the essence, the whole sefer written by Rabbi Yosef Giktilia, which was, or Jiktilia, I think it was pronounced, which he made it so much easier for us to understand these things. It's a hard sefer, but it's an easy sefer. And the whole thing is about the different Shemos Hashem and how everything comes from the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and it manifests itself into different Shemos and different, until it gets to the whole Torah, until it gets to the whole world. That's basically what the sefer is talking about. So we got to get to that one day. Okay, everyone should have a good fast and a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And your father should have a refuah shalem. Yeah.
Amen.